Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it is time to get back into the independent Yugoslavian aviation tech tree, and we have two more items to get through and then this will be finished. Basically we're having a look at the aircraft from Utva and also from Rogozarski, and a lot of these aircraft are either trainers or prototypes or I'm pretty sure didn't exist. So that is the three types we have today, and should be kind of interesting to look through. Utva seems to be, or UTVA, I'm just going to call it Utva just because it's easier to do. They seem to specialize, at least in this list, on military trainer aircraft. And we start off with the Utva 75. This thing is a basic military trainer. It is a low-wing monoplane piston-engined aircraft which was manufactured by Utva, and it was introduced in 1978 and produced between then and 1985. There was nearly 150 vehicles produced of this type, and what was kind of interesting was the first variant of it was actually an agricultural aircraft, and that I think is pretty nice. At the same time as well, since the one that we're looking at is the basic military trainer, this thing did have a two-seater variant with dual controls. It also had a four-seater variant with advanced avionics, which I think is pretty interesting and was used by many different countries. It was used by Serbia, Slovenia, and also Sudan, weirdly enough. It was also used by Bosnia and Herzegovina, so at least it got around the place when it came to its training flights. It was powered by a Lycoming IO360 B1F four-cylinder air-cooled horizontally opposed piston engine which had 180 horsepower. This thing could go at a maximum speed of 215 kilometers an hour. Yes, it is a pretty slow plane. Its cruise speed as well was 165 kilometers an hour, so you're not going to be breaking any speed records with this thing. Now, where does the armament come from? Well, technically, this vehicle has two hardpoints on it, and on those hardpoints you could mount a bunch of different things. It basically could carry around about 150 kilos of weight on each of the hardpoints. So this meant that you could either bring two Mach 7.62mm machine guns, you could bring two 120 kilo bombs or 450 kilo bombs, or you could maybe carry some rockets, either RL 128mm or maybe some rocket launchers 57mm in size. So you could be able to technically carry 12 rockets or 2 or 4 bombs, and then either maybe some guns as well. Obviously not all at the same time, but at least it would give you options. The next one we're having a look at is the Utva Laster 1. This is once again a trainer aircraft built by Utva Aviation Industry. It's a tandem two-seater low-wing trainer with a metal airframe, and this is actually currently still in service. Its first flight was in 1985, and it was introduced in 2010, or as the Laster 95. So this thing is used today as a trainer aircraft, and maybe in some other roles as well. But it was basically developed as a replacement for the Utva 75 and also the G2 Galeb in some little ways, which was the most commonly used trainer aircraft for the Yugoslav Air Force up until 1991. It is designed to be able to obviously do some basic training functions around aerobatics, instruments, and also tactical flying, and also basic training use of weapons and stuff like that, which is where obviously the vehicle comes in its own. It also uses a Lycoming AEIO 580 B1A engine. It's a 6-cylinder air-cooled horizontally opposed piston engine with 300 horsepower, and this machine can actually go a little bit faster. Instead of just being able to pass 200 kilometers like the last vehicle we had a look at, the wings were reinforced and the engine being replaced, it was able to technically go 560 kilometers an hour, but I'm not entirely entirely sure if that is correct or not. I feel like that 5 should be a 3. The provisions also were for, once again, some weaponry, because this thing had mounted on it 2 hardpoints. So you could either have 2 7.62mm machine gun pods, you could have rockets, you could have bombs, you could have any of that stuff if you wanted. And then there was another variant, the Laster 95N. Now this one is the one which had its first flight in 2009, and technically this thing actually had a downgrade in it. The speed performance of the vehicle was actually lower, and the new plane featured more secondary ordnance options such as 250 cal pods instead of the 30 cals, and also more unguided rocket options. So this thing would be able to have different rockets and slightly better gun pods, but overall it wouldn't be, that crazy. It would basically be the same as the Laster 1, just a little bit slower, and also be able to go at a maximum flight velocity of 345 kilometers an hour, and with the maximum takeoff weight being 1,210 of the vehicle and 1,450 for the utility category, as it would be used there. So we start off life in this part of the tech tree with 3 trainer aircraft. Can you guess what the next one is? That's right, it's a trainer aircraft, and it's in the form of the V54 Cobac. Now, the V54 Cobac actually has, this is one of the more weird ones, because, so this machine is a turboprop. Which is really cool. It's a really interesting idea. It's a single-engined, low-wing tandem seat turboprop, and it has a full metal frame. It also only has 1 prototype and is still in development. So this actually isn't complete yet. It isn't finished. The first prototype flight was planned in 2013. I think it was successful because I couldn't find anything about it being a disaster. But the main thing is this is going to be, or supposed to be, I should say, the new training aircraft for the Serbian Air Force. And the reason for this is being a turboprop, they feel it will make it easier to transition stuff like aerobatics, instrument and tactical flying to a jet trainer at higher training levels. So this will also, once again, just like its brothers, be able to fall the close air support and also counterinsurgency role, reconnaissance missions, and all of that stuff. And just as a nice little tidbit, Cobac in Serbian actually means sparrowhawk, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this machine is not finished. This machine is still in development. It is not completely finished. Anything could change on this aircraft, or it might just get cancelled. The interesting thing about it, though, how it is different to its predecessors, is it does have more hardpoints, at least on its mock-up, which was displayed in a few shows. So the mock-up of the Cobac has 4 hardpoints on it, which is pretty interesting. It's also powered by the Pratt & Whitney Canada PT6A62 turboprop with 1,149 horsepower, which is pretty cool, and then also has supposedly a maximum speed of 555 kilometers an hour with a cruise speed of 500 kilometers an hour. Other parts of it is it can carry, obviously the gun pods we talked about before, 7.62, 12.7, also 20mm cannons. And the other thing that is interesting about the Cobac, while it is still in development, they're also planning to mount air-to-air missiles or air-to-surface missiles on this thing as a trainer, or racks for practice bombs. There's also a centerline hardpoint, which can carry an electronic warfare pod. So this thing is going to be a very advanced trainer, but still a trainer, and also isn't finished yet. So that's where we're at with that. And then we've got the V-Harp, or the V-Harp. This thing was actually the trainer used before the SOCO 522 that we had a look at yesterday. It was a late 1940s two-seat advanced trainer. So its first flight was in 1949, and then it was introduced in 1952 and retired in 61 when they brought around the 522. So this thing had a cantilever low-wing monoplane, or it was a cantilever low-wing monoplane, and it was powered by the Ranger SVG 770C1B, which was an air-cooled inverted V12 engine, which had 520 horsepower with it. Its maximum speed was 362 kilometers an hour, and when it comes to what it was able to carry, well, it had 2 machine guns in it, unfortunately not marked what they are, and also 2 suspension pods which could either carry unguided rockets or up to 100 kilos of bombs. So you can see with the UTVA aircraft which are available here, they all are incredibly similar to each other when it comes to their actual capabilities. The only real difference between them is obviously the one which isn't finished yet, the Cobac, which might be a little bit crazy. Then we go on to Rogozarski. Now, Rogozarski actually has some really cool and interesting ideas. But the problem is, there is a few of them which I find a little bit dodgy. And what I mean by this is I don't know if they existed or not. And it seems like nobody else knows if they existed or not, or they are incredibly dubious. So we start off with those. We have the IK3. Now, obviously, the IK3 existed. It was a 1930s Yugoslav monoplane. It was a single-seat fighter designed by Ljubomir Lijek and Kostav Sivchev, and also Slobodan Zemik, and it was seen as a successor to, of course, the IK2, which was built by Icarus. Its armament was a 20mm, which was in the hub, and then also it had 2 fuselage-mounted synchronized machine guns. These machine guns were 7.92mm Browning FNs with 500 rounds per gun, and also you had one, the 20mm was an Oerlikon FF as well. So this thing would have packed a decent amount of firepower, very similar to some of the Soviet aircraft which would have been around at the time. At the time as well, during when it was being created, with its first flight being in 1938 and being introduced in 1940, it was considered comparable to foreign aircraft such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109E, which came into service, and also came into service in 1940. The prototype did crash during testing, and then there was 12 production aircraft which were delivered by July 1940. Now this is where it gets interesting. So just think about that, right? So the prototype crashed during testing, so that thing's left out. There were 12 production aircraft that were delivered by July 1940, right? Now, in this tech tree, in the independent Yugoslavian aviation tech tree, there are 7 IKV variants. 7. Now, I had to do a bunch of digging into these different variants to see if they actually existed or not, and my general ideas is a lot of them did not, and we'll go through the reasons why. So basically, if you want to know the specifications of the ones that did exist, they had a Hispano-Suiza 12 liquid-cooled V12 piston engine, which had 980 horsepower, so a pretty powerful engine, and this thing could go 527 kilometers an hour, and also, you know, had a decent cruise speed of 400 kilometers an hour. That's pretty good at the start of the war. Now, according to many different things, including this independent Yugoslav aviation tech tree, there was other ones such as certain projects, e.g. the M105PF variant, and then also the IK3, which had a DB601 powered, it used the DB601 engine. I'm going to read you something, and this is why it gets a little bit confusing. A shortage of engines was a major obstacle to mass production and development of the IK3. So tests were conducted with more powerful engines, including the Daimler-Benz DB601, the Rolls-Royce Merlin II, and the Hispano-Suiza 12Y51. The tests were incomplete at the time of the Axis invasion, and the only prototype to be fitted with a non-production engine was deliberately destroyed by factory personnel during the invasion, along with the incomplete production aircraft. Development of a dual-control two-seater variant of the IK3 had commenced, but pressure on the design team had delayed the completion of the project when the invasion intervened. Then, the development of the IK3 encouraged the three designers to pursue other goals as well. So, do you see what that says? Right? That says that a lot of these weren't finished, or a lot of these were not fully built. That includes the twin engine design, and that includes any of these which had, the twin seat design, and also the ones which were not actually, which had the foreign engines in them, including the DB601 and the Merlin II. So out of these, 7 that exist in the tree, I would probably be comfortable putting in 2. The prototype and then the actual production aircraft which fought and actually was used during its operational history. There were 6 IK3s which were serviceable when the Axis invaded Yugoslavia on the 6th of April 1941. All 6 were in service with the 51st Independent Fighter Group at Zemun near Belgrade, and pilots flying the IK3 claimed 11 Axis aircraft and which had been shot down during the 11-day war. According to one account, to prevent them from falling into German hands, the surviving aircraft and incomplete airframes were destroyed by their crews and factory staff, and another account suggests that one aircraft survived the invasion and was later destroyed by sabotage. So yeah, it's kind of as simple as that. And something also to note about the IK3, its design was actually used as the basis for the S-49, the Icarus S-49, which is one of the aircraft we looked at the other day. So at least that's kind of interesting to look at. But overall, the IK3s, like as I said, I would be comfortable putting 2 of them in the tree, not 7. The next one is the Rogozarski RO-SIM, I think it's 14H, which this is actually a pretty cool machine. It's a coastal reconnaissance float plane, and also technically a light bomber. And it had 3 crew members. There was 19 of them built, and this was a very early war machine, produced from 1939 to 1941, and this in general was a pretty interesting thing. The armament on this was 2 7.9mm machine guns, one in the front, one in the back, and it could carry one 100-kilo bomb, or 2 50s, or 12 12-kilo bombs. So not exactly raising the roof or anything like that. It also had a maximum speed of 208 kilometers an hour, and was powered, at least the first one, this Series 2, by the Argus AS-10C engines, which were 8-cylinder V-line engines with 240 horsepower each. So once again, not breaking any speed records. This plane was also used by Italy, which is kind of interesting, and also the UK even nabbed one, which is pretty cool. Then we have the development on top of the Rogozarski, and this is the RO-SIM-14B-H. And what this was a slightly upgraded version. Basically, with the 3 crew members, it had the twin 7.92mm machine guns in addition to the light bombing abilities, and that was basically because this thing had these slightly more powerful engines. They actually produced 270 horsepower. They used the Argus AS-10E engines instead of the 10C engines, and these ones were built in 1940. So these ones, these planes were a little bit more powerful when it came to the engine department, but everything else was basically the same. Then we move on to another project. This is the Rogozarski R313, or the Rogozarski SIM-15. This was a twin-engine fighter / light bomber / reconnaissance. And you may be asking, How can this thing be everything? It's because they only made one of them, and I don't even know if they put guns on the damn thing. So anyway, the R313, it was a 2-seat twin-engine monoplane. It's actually really cool as a general idea, and also it was nicknamed the Yugoslav Mosquito, which is a spit in the face to the actual mosquito that existed under the Royal Air Force. So I'm not even going to contend that. This thing has one prototype. Its first flight was in 1940, and then the major issues that this thing had, it was powered by two Walter Sagita inverted air-cooled V12 piston engines with 493 horsepower each, and it was able to go a maximum speed of 376 kilometers an hour. So this machine had very underpowered engines for the weight that it was, and one of the major issues that was seen in it is it needed more powerful engines, which would come in the form of the Merlin or the DB601, but this didn't happen, and then the war broke out, and basically it was just left. It actually became part of the 603 training squadron, which was located at Grab near Trebinje during the April War, and it was damaged and abandoned attempting to take off from Grab on the 12th of April 1941. A month later, the Germans took control and sold the machine to the Croats, who had taken over the Icarus factory. They renamed the aircraft Independent after repairs. They did a test flight of it, but then sabotage was detected, so serious that further repairs couldn't be carried out. So this ended the career of this one prototype. Now, the way that it's also noted from this thing, it had one 20mm HS-404 cannon and one 7.92mm in the back, and it did have provisions for about 400 kilos worth of bombs, but I don't know if they were ever fitted with the guns. And basically, this was the way that everything is worded, once again, when I look at all the articles for it. The reconnaissance variant of this aircraft was due to be equipped with a camera, radio, a 20mm, and the 7.92 machine gun. That to me doesn't say that it was equipped, it just means that it was due to be. And then also the light bomber variants would carry 4 106 kilo bombs. So at least you get some weird and wonderful sized bombs out of this thing. But yeah, I can't tell if this thing existed or not. Well, sorry. It did exist. It was test flown. I don't know if it was test flown with its armament. The next one is the Rogozarski IK3 This is a twin. This is a 2-seater variant of the IK3. Once again, as we talked about before, this was a vehicle which was in production or in design and was cut short by what was going on. So not entirely sure if it was finished, but there you go. Then we've also got the Rogozarski R-100. This was a 2-seat parasol-winged plane, and it actually is a pretty cool little machine. It was also designed once again to be a fighter trainer built by Rogozarski in Yugoslavia before World War II. Its first flight was in 1938, it was introduced in 1939, and was actually retired in 1950, and there was about 26 of them built, and they served with the Yugoslavian Air Force until the fall of Yugoslavia in 1941, and after that 11 R-100s were used by the newly formed Air Force of the independent state of Croatia, which would use them as sometimes for ground attack aircraft, and also there was one which was used by Italia Regia Aeronautica, so the Italians. This machine was powered by a Nomron 7K 7-cylinder radial. It had 420 horsepower, and once again, the maximum speed of this thing was 260 kilometers an hour. So you're really not, once again, breaking the sound barriers. This thing was also armed with one 7.7mm Darn machine gun as an offensive armament, and also had a rear turret with one, the 7.7mm, and it could carry one 50-kilo bomb or 150 not 150 kilo bombs. It could carry one 50-kilo bomb or one 100-kilo bomb with the machine. Then we move on to the Rogozarski Sim-14H Series 0. This is the pre-production variant of the float plane that we were looking at before. It had 240 horsepower engines and also a different tail and canopy design. Apart from that, it is exactly the same. And then the last one, this is the LVT1. Now this is the most interesting one to me personally, and also one that we've covered in the other section as well. So I don't know why it's hit twice, but this is basically a Hurricane Mark 1, which was produced under license by Rogozarski factory, and it was refitted with a DB601AA engine, and or DB601A engine, I apologize. And this was actually a pretty interesting machine. You know, a Hurricane with a German engine in it, just like how you had the Spitfire with the DB605 engine. I personally think this would be awesome to see. Also, with the installation of the DB601, they could fit a 20mm in the nose as well, so therefore increasing its firepower from just the 7.7s to also have access to the 20mm. This supposedly served with the Yugoslav Air Force and was documented to do so. It engaged a Bf-110 that was on a recon mission and forced him to land at Kraljevo, and the Bf-110 was later used by the Yugo Air Force in their country's defense. But unfortunately, there's no photographic evidence of this machine, but it is documented showing that it did exist, so that's pretty cool. Now, that is the end of the independent Yugoslavian aviation tech tree. It's taken us a while to get through, mainly because there's so many weird and wonderful designs. A lot of people have asked me my opinion on should this be added to the game. No, it definitely shouldn't. There are too many aircraft here which would be useless in terms of the game. There are too many aircraft here which could easily be slotted into the nations that already exist. And on top of this as well, you could if you wanted to add this into the game, you do not add it in as an independent nation. You would attach it to another nation as a minor nation, because otherwise you're going to end up with a bunch of people who have to grind out trainer aircraft for 2 ranks and wonder why their performance is not getting any better in those trainer aircraft, and then also stuff like float planes which have 50 kilo and 100 kilo bombs. A lot of the vehicles in this tech tree are interesting but useless when it comes to War Thunder, and a lot of them flat out didn't exist either, which I've gone through as well, so therefore would not fit the game's criteria. So overall, when it comes to it, no. It's a big fat no from me when it comes to this tech tree. What I would personally do is, as I said, I would attach it to a major nation, such as the USSR, and then, or such as whoever you wanted to attach it to, or filter the vehicles into the separate nations which they have ties to, so at least you can have some kind of representation of the country's aircraft, but at the same time, you cannot have this as an independent tree. And that's not even going over the ground, or the helicopters, or the naval stuff, where Yugoslavia would have even more issues. This would be an awful tree to play, just looking at the general aircraft. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hosest Kishol, Hans, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.